Una Serpiente. She was born Una Serpiente, a snake, her home the floor and tree trunks of the Amazonian rainforest. Her mother, Sophia, could change form. She told her this was the process of life. She grew up wanting to shift into other forms, but her mother told her it is not as easy as just changing forms, and that one day she would find her own path and it will lead her to her own form. One morning, she heard her mother talking to her neighbor, Penelope, who was in peacock form. They were planning to go to the mountains for berries and fruit. She decided to join them. They left with the sunrise. She followed behind as they made their way up the serpentine paths. She noticed how the paths mimicked the shape of her own form, curvy, winding, and changing. She noticed the stone sliding across her belly as she slithered forward. She felt her movements like a trance. She wasn't sure how long she was in this realm, but she remembered the exact moment she no longer heard her mother's voice. She looked around everywhere, climbing a tree even to see if she could spot them. She was lost. Her breath quickened and fear took over. She didn't know her way home. She decided to continue forward. Fear eventually became anger as she hurled herself through the leaves. How could her mother lose her? Is Penelope so much more interesting that they didn't even notice she was gone? How could she have let herself be so consumed by her own thoughts that she lost her way? Hours passed and she grew tired and started to slow down. She felt vibrations and saw specks of light in the distance. She heard laughter and followed the sound. Bright blue lights got bigger as she approached. A colony of glow-in-the-dark mushrooms were gathered, welcoming her without words. She felt their pulses under the dirt below. Their light was the most beautiful she had ever seen, like thousands of topaz crystals illuminating the darkest of voids. Their light protecting her as she slept. She dreamt of being like them, having her own light. She woke with the sun, her skin starting to itch. Was she changing form? The mushrooms told her that she will remain in this form, that she is only shedding her skin until she meets Santosha. "Who is this?" she asked, and the mushrooms replied, "Not a who. Santosha is a deep knowing of contentment in your heart." Her journey continued into the mountains, her skin slowly starting to unravel and loosen. Time sped up and slowed down at the same time. Around midday, she found a cave and a large tree in which to rest under in the shade. She laid at the base of the tree. She started to drift off, hearing a voice. It sounded like it was coming from the tree. She looked up and saw two huge eyes. Guava was staring down at her. She whispered something in a language she didn't understand, but she felt the entire meaning. Guava reached her branches into her heart. She held it for a moment, and for the first time since she was lost, she felt safe, accepted, even strong. Guava silently gave her a knowing that this journey isn't about being lost, but it is about finding herself. After some time, she awoke, wondering if it was really a dream or reality. Onward she went, missing her mother and home. Days went on as she went further into the mountains, following the sun each day moving west. She shed her skin on day 7 and woke to the same scales. In the morning, she woke to the heat of the sun, her scales more sensitive to the rays of light. She took a path lined with shadows, grateful for the canopies of trees and the cool clay under her belly. It started to rain, and she heard singing in the distance. She followed the sound and saw a fuchsia flower, her song sounding like one of grief. As she got closer, she saw another flower, dried and shriveled on the ground. She stood there, witnessing this moment. The flower noticed her presence and motioned her to come closer. To her surprise, the flower was smiling. She wrapped her in her leaves and whispered the words of the song. They sang together, getting louder and louder, their harmonies amplifying each word as they became woven into the trees and the soil and the air. She felt her heartbeat syncing up with the vibration of the earth. She felt the flower's heart beating in her own. She felt beautiful and alive. Once the singing ended, they talked for hours about the cycles of life and death, how pain is necessary to bloom and shed skin, but how much more painful it can be to fear those changes. It is necessary to balance fears with curiosity and humility. The flower told her the way to the waterfall where her mother was journeying to. It would take a few more days to get there, but she continued. She thought about her scales and how the colors of the forest were living on her skin. She remembered how it felt to connect with the heart and sing her own beauty for the first time. She traveled through the night as she knew she was close to the waterfall. She followed the sound of the river, and even though it was dark, she didn't need her eyes to follow the path. Amber lights appeared ahead, slowly, one by one. Floating candles started to gather around her, flickering and guiding her. She heard the chorus of the waterfall in her mother's voice. She had arrived. Her mother told her she looked as radiant as the sun, and for the first time she believed her words. Her mother had prepared a gathering for her as her birthday was on this day. All of her friends were there. Her favorite foods, guava, the mushrooms, and the flowers were all together. She felt whole. She went into the waterfall, a sacred place where new forms are born. She thanked the waters, and before her eyes her friends changed. From mushrooms to lotus flowers, from trees to parrots, from peacocks to earthworms, she began to feel her own body transform. Feet grew, arms extended, along with a neck and a head. She curled her toes and fingers, feeling into this new form. She had shed many skins to get here. She was human. She was Santosha.